Yes, it's talk time, and we're still keeping tabs on the story of a second bailout fund for distressed states as the country's fiscal authority prepares to raise a 90 billion naira monetary support for states.
Finance Minister Kemi Adeosun is insisting that the funding support is not a bailout, as widely speculated, but a loan that the state will pay back over a period of time. But there are questions regarding how state government spent the first bailout funds.
In April, the Independent Corrupt and Other Related Offences Commission, ICPC, released a report showing how state governments spent the bailout funds meant for payment of workers' salaries. And that's our second big story this morning. As a matter of fact, it is our main issue this morning, it's our main story.
Yeah.
So for now, we're joined by our guest right here in the studio, of course, who will be looking at this for us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
It's good to have you on the show. Mr. Olusegun Omishakin.
Yeah.
So, well, FG gave bailout to 27 states late last year, about 338 billion naira to be repaid within 20 years and meant solely for payments of salaries. Now we hear from the ICPC, alongside, the labor, the NLC, that these monies that were given to these 27 states have largely been diverted. And now we're talking about another bailout fund.
Yeah. This is not surprising, really, because I think one of the reasons why we have it publicized like this is because it's the federal government that is giving them the money. We don't always have it like this before, if the states are just going out there, get the loan, get the money, and then use it for anything. But because the federal government, of course, in itself is stressed. And so if I'm down and I'm giving you the little that I have, then I must just know that you are using it for that purpose. And it's highly unfortunate that states could go out there and say, this is why I need this money. And then if the donor, when you get any money or fund from anybody, you will stay by the terms and conditions of the giver. So if you are deviating from that, this brings in the question of, is there any kind of monitoring or evaluation framework from the federal government? Indeed.
Was government too much in a haste to give out this particular loan and not, just like in the second one, we hear about this 22, conditions or conditionalities, as it were, for these states to actually be, able to get these loans. Should government have put even more stringent measures in place before giving out this 338 billion?
Yeah, let's look back. Let's look at how everything started. When this present government at the federal level, when they were trying to come in, they met a lot of, in quotes, some, mess. And when they came in, that was when we had problem with the international oil price. We are still having the problem. So financially, the federal government is stressed. Or at the state level, people are stressed. So, and the government will want to retain its legitimacy by saying, okay, I'm going to help some of you. So as at the first giving out of the money, the federal government was not really too strong in trying to evaluate or to look at whether these people are going to pay the money back or not. So what the federal government did was to say, okay, let me just give you the money, use it for the purpose. But you see the case now. The federal government itself is not having much. And now to ask for the second is just, I don't know, it's just surprising.
Without giving good account of the first.
Of the first.
Of the first bailout. So let's give a little background to the story. Now, despite a massive bailout by the federal government last year, dozens of states still find, they still have difficulties paying workers' salaries.
A total of 338 billion naira was issued as bailout to 27 district states in September 2015.
Kogi State got the highest with 50.8 billion naira, while Kebbi State got the lowest with 690 million naira.
Others are Abia State, Adamawa, Bauchi, Bayelsa, Benue, Borno, Cross River, Delta, Ebonyi, Edo, Ekiti, Enugu, Gombe, Imo, Katsina, Kwara, Nasarawa, Niger, Ogun, Ondo, Osun, Oyo, Plateau, Sokoto, and Zamfara. Let's just take some of the states one after the other and compare them with the allegations that the ICPC have raised. Imo, for instance, the allegation was that the monies were diverted into 3 separate accounts.
Yeah.
26 billion naira.
26, you know, and the commissioner in response said, who says that monies can't be paid to those accounts? That if those accounts were being used before now for salaries, is there anything stopping them from using such monies, paying such monies into those accounts? One. Then, and that the issue of pension, that even though now they pay pension out of the bailout, that pension was not part
of the
the money
deal.
for the bailout. Can you respond to some of this?
You know, everything boils down to this simple arithmetic, that some of our states, in fact, larger percentage of our states, about more than 90% of states in Nigeria, has serious issue with viability and fiscal sustainability. And you know, if you look at the structure, you see that every state and even the federal government, what they wait for is the proceeds from the sale of crude oil. And so every time each of the states will go to the federal government, collect its own share and come back and do it. We have here a very serious fundamental problem, not just for the states, even for the federal government. Now the federal government could talk, as I said, could say, oh, you are not using it, you are. Let me ask you a question. Where was ICPC? This is not the first time these states are getting money, either from the federal government or from the international donor or from anywhere. And in fact, before any state gets any money, the federal government must, see to it, sign and give the approval. For instance, if a state like my state, Osun State, wants to get anything from the World Bank, the federal government must see to it.
Yeah, so the point I was trying to bring out is it possible that when in this era of TSA, where you have a treasury single account, shouldn't the state also follow suit, where they know that when monies are being paid into particular account, you don't have the right to just pay the money any way you want?
Yeah, I think that's what brought about this case of fiscal sustainability plan that the federal government is now trying to introduce at the state level. Of course, if it's the federal government, TSC is already functioning. But at the state level, I think there are some timelines now, maybe by December 2016 or 17, somehow each state is expected to kind of follow the structure and make sure that any money that comes in is known for what purpose. And when you see states saying that, okay, this is the reason why I got the money and this is how I spend the money, you ask yourself, what was the deal between the states and the federal government? Was there any framework as how will this money be judiciously spent? If there is nothing, in fact, the federal government seems to be, criticizing the states that many of them came in and say, okay, we need this money for salaries, but really not for salary. And so they use that to get a kind of a moral support so that the federal government could give out the money. And then I'm still thinking that the most important thing for the federal government and the state government is to look at how sustainable
this is in the first place.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go even further. Now, the report by ICPC has highlighted how some state governors diverted the bailout funds for other purposes other than that which it was meant for, which we have already established. Now, the report published by the Commission showed that Benue, Enugu, Imo and Zamfara states topped the list of those who mismanaged the funds.
That of Zamfara. Now, interestingly, what we heard was that even before the bailout, they weren't owing salaries at all, but they got the bailout anyway. Why?
Should this have even happened in the first place?
I don't think so. I don't think so. The bailout should be for a purpose. And I don't think the more money you have, the more difficult it will be for you to pay your bills. I don't think so. I don't know how that works.
What does that say about the federal government? Perhaps their mentality of just, okay, maybe
let's throw money at the
let's
problem.
throw money around and make those people happy without doing their due diligence to find out if the state really needs the money.
That is a big question. And if, again, to add to that fact is that the federal government, as at now, is even stressed. The federal government will come out and tell you every day the price of oil has fallen, we cannot do this, we cannot do that, we have to use TSA to mop up some money, we have to block
Sorry
leakages.
for cutting you short.
So eventually...
Governor Shomole actually said, based on this particular bailout, I remember we actually have a clip, if we remember that.
Okay.
He said that it's good that they can approach the federal government and table their problems without being lectured on fiscal responsibility. Really, who do you think has failed here? The governors who are not honest in case of Zamfara, or the federal government who won't take their fiscal responsibility duty very seriously?
Yeah, two ways. To be sincere, the states are autonomous. There is this extent, there is a limited extent to which the federal government can monitor the fiscal activities of the states, to be sincere. That's why you see them still claiming that this is the money we got and we know the best how to spend it. But the question again is, who gave out these funds? If you are giving out the fund without your own framework to monitor, or without following the due process in terms of the agreement between, maybe federal government just gave out this money and say, okay, we need it for salary, take. And there is nothing like the clause. This money should be spent on this purpose, and then there will be some agreement. Again, from the side of the federal government also needs to kind of have a more friendly relationship with some of these states. It's not just enough for states to just come to the federal government, I need something, and then there is no federal government inside that can really see to it that these people need this, or kind of evaluation and see whether, let's look at your statistics from so year to so year, let's look at how you are able to generate your own IGR, let's look at your ability to pay back. Nothing was done.
You talked about, the sustainability of this bailouts from the federal government to the states. Now, is there a possibility that there might just be a tendency to want to blackmail the federal government? And so that is why the states have used salaries, for example, to say, look, we need funds. And don't forget that we're just coming out of elections. Is there a possibility that a lot of funds were used on, executing the elections? And so you have the states, in this situation?
Let's remove the whole possibility. We all know that might be the deal. And we know how the states is structured in Nigeria. And we know how federal government is structured politically. You see, if you look at the typical states in Nigeria, the basic question is that some of these states are not being run as if they are into business. They are just being run like, I'm the head, I'm waiting for the month end, and I go somewhere to collect the money. And I first use the first time, the first 2 years to settle my debts, political debts, and then I continue spending. If each state is run in such a way that you believe the federal government will not give you any money, or will scrutinize you before giving you anything, or it was when the present governor came that they started this issue of you don't have the right to just go out there and start borrowing. In fact, some of these states were already planning to borrow elsewhere, outside of Nigeria, before federal government said, no, we're not going to agree with this. We do that. Let's look at what. So each state must look inward. This has been the same stories. We've been talking about looking inward looking. How long are we going to keep depending on the federal government or federal allocation? The problem has been there for years. It was because of the fall in oil price.
And it seems to be a question nobody has an answer to. But let's go even deeper, Mr. Omishakin, with our information for our viewers. Now, according to the report, 8 states have excess monies left after settling their staff salaries and emoluments from their respective bailout funds. They include Adamawa, Kebbi, Cross River, Katsina, Nasarawa, Ondo, Sokoto, and Delta states.
A good thing you mentioned Ondo, and you were talking about election then. There were allegations Ondo had excess, according to the APC chapter in Ondo State. Okay, so the excess in Ondo State then, the first bailout, was used as soft loans for the road transport union so they can give them support during the election. But funny enough, today, Ondo State, the same Ondo State, cannot even pay salaries.
The same problem. It will surprise you to hear that as of 2015, December 2015, the total budget of all states in Nigeria, out of the total budget, only 18%, precisely 18.3%, happens to be IGR. In other words, you want to spend 100 naira and you have the capacity to generate 18 naira. That is questionable. And this is how it has been going for long. That is fundamentally questionable. When you go to some states, you ask yourself, what is happening here? Where are the business activities? Nothing. And if you look again at the state's workforce size, you ask yourself, the states also needs to look critically at that. And most of the time you see that those people that always bring out things, fight at the NLC, and it's because it concerns them. You go to a typical state and you hear the number of the people that are working for them in the state, working for states. And then you ask yourself, how do you pay these people? So the structure of employment, the structure of the economy at the state level needs to change. Nigeria for long have been concentrating on the federal government, TSA, federal government, corruption, federal government, everything, federal government. But federal government constitutionally has serious limitation in going into states and enforcing some things. So it's high time we started looking at what is the administration at the state level. And
we have heard reports that this President Buhari plans to merge these 15 states that we've heard may go bankrupt anytime soon. Is that the way this government should be going? Would that be the way out?
In what sense?
Because there's been the question of viability of the states, and this seems to be, playing out here. Most of the states obviously are looking like they're not viable in any way, economically and otherwise.
There was a report conducted by a magazine called Economic Confidential.
For almost all states, Lagos is one. Lagos and maybe Niger State or something like that. They seems to be. 12 seems to be the one that's kind of.
Rivers.
And of course, you have Ogun State too.
In terms of IGR, you have Lagos, you have Delta, you have Rivers, you have Ogun, you have Edo.
Of course, I'm talking with respect to the bailout fund in terms of your ability to pay back first. Not even your IGR. Okay. Even if your IGR is low, at least you are paying back what you are owing. So these states, and it's good we're having this problem. I keep telling people when there is a challenge, anything is good. We don't just have to look at it as a negative thing. It's a good thing. Look at the case of Nigeria. The price of oil fell, and then quickly we understood what is called TSA. If we're still buying crude oil, selling it at $100 above, nothing will be tea, not to talk of
and now we're even talking about diversifying the economy.
The TSA had been this administration is just implementing it.
Yeah,
it was there. It was formulated and it was meant to be implemented, but it never took off.
Yeah, formulated, meant to be implemented.
So now let's look at this. What practical terms, what the ICPC is planning to do, working with MDAs, the ministries, departments, and agencies, to nip corruption in the bud, so that this, situation that we have doesn't occur going forward. Will that be, how effective do you think that will be? And to what extent? An ICPC, does it really have what it takes to check, these excesses at the state level?
I don't think the starting point is for the ICPC to start looking into how to stop this problem. The ICPC just came here and said, at the directive of the federal government, to look into how these funds were spent. The most and the fundamental question is to ask ourselves, even if you are stopping people from being corrupt at the state level and you are trying to make sure that they are more financially disciplined and you are trying to make sure that they do all these things, how sustainable will they still go? For how long? To be sincere, for how long? If you cannot generate, unlike Lagos State, if you cannot generate at least 50%, something that this is what you have a big problem. It will continue. In fact, more states will be joining them, and states will keep asking for money from the federal government or from elsewhere. So the fundamental thing I think could be done is to look critically at this.
Okay, let's look at other states. Imo State, the ICPC alleged that out of the 26.8 billion Naira bailout funds received by the state government from the CBN, more than 6 billion Naira was transferred into certain Imo State government accounts which are not related to salaries and emoluments. But the Chief Press Secretary to Governor Rochas Okorocha refuted this claim, saying the commission did not expand on its discovery and only went to press with some of the facts it uncovered. Which brings me to the question, really, playing the devil's advocate. The ICPC says it relied on petitions from private individuals to come to this conclusion that states actually diverted the funds. How reliable, really, are this? Do you think this is forensic enough, you know, for the ICPC to actually go out there and say, look, these states have actually diverted funds?
That brings us to the case of accountability and openness at the state level. You see, today people are, anytime you want to criticize the federal government on doing anything, you fall back on the data you have, either from the MBS, from CBN. But at the state level, we don't have anything like that. States will not tell you how much they have, except you are really part of them. Nothing is public. So if ICPC comes out now and say this is what I've got from people, then we have to rely on that. That is data.
In any case, that's what their mandate says. They get complaints from people, they take it, they transfer it to their investigative department, to the legal department, and from there they make the working.
So it's left for the state to say based on our own statistics. And if they've been pushing this thing on the internet, everybody have the access. You don't need to defend yourself as a state. People will say, oh, no, this thing is wrong. This is how much is spent. But everything is done there, you know, in the dark, and nobody can say what is right or what is wrong. So I think this is a lesson for state governors and administrators to also be more transparent in what they get and how these things are spent.
All right, let's go more and tell you more about the state's bailout funds and allegations trailing that. The report also shows that Benue State received 12 billion naira as bailout fund and disbursed 10 billion naira with a balance of 1 billion naira. Analysis of the document submitted revealed a double payment of 37 million naira in favor of the office of the deputy governor. This double payment is presently being investigated. Meanwhile, the Benue State government refuted claim by the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission. There you go.
Double payment.
A double payment. And in response, there was a statement coming from the state government about that money paid into the accounts of the deputy governor was meant for the lobby stars, the football players in that state.
Part of the diversion
as a deputy governor, the coach of the lobby stars.
I don't. Just like we've been saying, it's a two-way thing, to be sincere with you. The federal government also has a lot to do. The state level administrator or whatever, they have a lot to do. For instance, and the citizen, every one of us, we have a lot to do. We just have to ask ourselves, how are we? You cannot, the solution is not fighting the corrupt practice. The solution is not ICPC. Oh, you keep fighting them, oh, you arrest some of them, and then what? Another person comes in. The same precedent, the same model.
So what's the solution? The
solution is to ask ourselves, first of all, are these states sincerely, are they being well paid? Is the structure of fiscal federalism working for us? That's a big question that many people may not want to go to touch. That's the first question. The second question is, how transparent are the states at the state level? How transparent are they when it comes to how much we earn and how much we are spending? Second. The third question is, what is the productive capacity of states? How are these states being able to generate money from within? What is the level of business activity? What is the level of infrastructure among states? No, we've been talking about federal government, FDI, remittances, this and that. But we've just been looking at it from the perspective of the federal and the federal level. How attractive are these states in terms of foreign direct investment? How attractive?
All right, Mr. Misha, I can just hold on there as we move on. Enugu State got 10 billion naira bailout funds granted Enugu, well, as at November 16, 2015. The state disbursed about 6 billion naira to settle domestic debts, thus leaving staff salaries and emoluments unpaid. Other states indicted in the report include Zamfara State, which got 10 billion bailout funds, but was not even owing at the time, as you heard earlier. Now, Osun State received 34.9 billion, and ICPC is alleging the state only disbursed 16.3 billion naira.
Of course, others are Nasarawa, Ekiti, and of course Adamawa State. But back to that of Enugu State, where some of the money went into servicing domestic debt. And also, if you link that with what also happened in Imo State, the statement they also gave out also said that some of those money were also meant to pay off some contractors, apart from pension, some contractors and some projects that they were funding. In your mind, you probably would think, okay, fine, but does that really still absorb them of the fact that they use the money for another purpose?
Yeah, I think where we can blame them is whether the agreement or terms or the condition actually say you must use this for salary, or whether the money was given out, so you don't pay, oh, take this money, go and settle all this. Because to be sincere, if you pay the salary this year, your debt servicing is an issue, it's still running, and eventually it will begin to erode you the capacity to pay the next year's salary. So for some of these people to say, let me service this debt, let me do this thing, they may be right. And in fact, it's not only the salary cases that these people are having. The salary is just a symptom of the fundamental problem they have. Maybe if they settle some of these cases, they can say, okay, now I can breathe, now I can face these salary people. I'm just kind of acting as if they are right. But in the real sense of it, I think they need to follow the condition, the terms and condition of the money. I don't think the federal government really, that the federal government really specify this, or they really scrutinize them, before giving out this. I think that's why we're having ourselves in this mess. Because if you get any money from IMF, you don't just go there and say, I need money, I'm hungry, and they take. No.
In fact, just as you mentioned IMF, you mentioned conditionality.
Conditionality, thoroughness, sincerity. They will look at your account for the past. Are you really sure you can't pay this?
Are you credit worthy?
Are you credit worthy? I don't think at this federal level, federal government was able to do anything like this for the states. It's just like emotional appeal. Okay, so they're my boys. We just give it to them, so they quickly grab it.
And you think going forward, it looks like Kemi Adeosun, the finance minister, representing, of course, the government, it looks like government really has learned some lessons.
Yeah.
And that's why it's coming up with this, conditions to also of that.
And if you look at the terms and conditions or the action plans in that fiscal responsibility plan at the state level, they are very good, really. But you ask yourself some questions. Is this a framework? Is this just a policy, or does it have any legal backing? That's a fundamental and constitutional question. I'm not a lawyer, but I think people should look at that. Do you just tell states how to spend money, when to spend money, publish this? And I don't know.
Without giving it right.
Yeah, we need to look at it from the constitutional level and say, okay, do I even have the right in the first instance to tell states how you must spend the money? That's why the federal government doesn't always need to be acting like the controller of every state. The state must stand up. The citizen must stand up and hold the state's governor or whoever accountable. Let things be functioning. Because if the federal government is not even doing that, let things be functioning at the state level. This is like a business, a CEO. If you are not functioning, you know the implication. And in fact, the way you come in will show out whether you're going to function or not. If we spend billions on campaign, billions on just getting there, you just have to know that something.
And these states are already saying that they are able to meet these conditions that the government is coming up with. Do you have any concerns as to that? I mean, is this another rush to just collect the money and...
Which state will say, I can't make it? In distress, you will meet every condition. Give me the money first.
Even they have to cook the books?
Yeah.
Is that possible?
Give me the money first. That's why the federal government needs to go beyond states saying, I can pay. Go inside. Give them the conditions first. Let us see how you've been spending your money. And I asked myself, I was thinking, assuming this state says, okay, we cannot even meet it. Are you going to just leave them? Would the states be dying? So the question is not just ICPC, it's not just federal government giving out the money. The question is the structure of the Nigerian economy at the state level, at the local government level is bad.
So is it true federalism that people are clamoring for? Is that what
maybe
the solution?
I'm just putting that forward, but to some extent it will, in terms of how you generate your money.
Federalism.
Because yes, now we're talking about solid mineral development. We're talking of government coming in, and you know that see some laws that see preventing states to gain ownership of some of these solid minerals. So in some instances, we could look at all this federalism stuff and ask ourselves, maybe if we relax some of this law or constitution, maybe these people can gain ownership
free up the states to actually
and then
be able to perform.
Yes.
Okay, let's look at some of the states that are still owing salaries. Kaduna, Kwara, Kogi State that actually has about 50 or got about 50 billion naira of the bailout fund. Osun, Oyo, Ondo, Ekiti, Imo, Yobe, Bauchi, Taraba, and Nasarawa states, just to mention a few.
Some states that have managed to pay have slashed the salaries between 30 to 50%, while others have stopped paying leave grants, pensions, and other workers' entitlement.
So, like they say, half bread is better than none. Some states seem to, be taking to that age-old wisdom.
Now, from looking at this story, I want to ask myself a very good question. Where are the state-level legislative members? Where are they in this show? If you're talking of money in Nigeria, federal government, Senate, and in fact, they will criticize the government. You cannot collect this loan. You will collect this loan. All this. They will function. But at the state level,
there seems to be no checks and balances.
That's the problem.
That's what some people are saying, that in most cases the legislature at the state level is just they are an appendage of the executive.
Yes, and that brings us to the issue of political awareness at the state level. You wouldn't see anybody trying to critically look at who becomes the state governor. Everybody is waiting for the federal government, federal level, national level election, who is our president. As if whoever is the president or the party, they will just deal. See, there is no federal government, in quotes, practically, physically anywhere.
Indeed. It's the states that actually
divide all states
do the job
by 36. Say, okay, let's say they exist in the federal territory capital, but any other place is the state that has the job. So the state must be functioning. The state must not just be clamoring for regional government, we want to be on our own, want to have our police. They must also look at themselves and say, we want to be financially independent. Now let's even look very quickly before
we let you go. There seems to be very weak collaboration between these agencies, EFCC, ICPC, and all the rest of them in trying to interrogate and investigate these states, especially as it pertains to bailout funds and maybe even other issues, that affect the states.
And don't forget the immunity clause that you have in the Constitution. Yes. They cannot be prosecuted.
Yes, indeed. Speaking of that, how do you prosecute governors, that have been found wanting, especially in a situation where, the Constitution protects them from prosecution? So who takes responsibility for?
I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to make any. But really, that's a big problem for us. These are the people who collect the money. You cannot touch them. And when they leave, and you are claiming you want to touch, the deed is done. The next governor comes in, inherit the debt, and he pleads. And so I think there is need for a strong synergy between the federal government parastatals and their corresponding states bodies. There is need for them to work together and not wait for special day to look into what is happening.
All right, and we have to leave it there. Segun Omishakin, thank you so much for looking at this with us on TVC Breakfast this morning.